What is up, Nets fans? Welcome to the Brooklyn Buzz. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, Jack Manuell, and special guest today, Victor Sabatel. What's up, guys?
What's going on, guys?
We've got the teacher squad on point.
Yeah, I'm not a teacher, but I think I can try to make it work. Obviously, we are continuing our series comparing the Nets to their division foes. Today, we got the Knicks. Vic's going to help us with that. Before we get started, though, quick reminder, you can check out the show iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, Google Play, Dash Radio, and NetsRepublic.com. Also, head to DesignTree/OffTheGlass. Use discount code OTG5 for $5 off. Got some Brooklyn Buzz tees, some other tees dropping very soon. But let's get right into the comparison. Obviously, Knicks and Nets, big talk, especially after the Nets signed KD and Kyrie, who Knicks fans expected to come there pretty much since February. But we're not going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about team comparison. We'll get into it with the guards to start off. We got Kyrie Irving, Karis LeVert, Spencer Dinwiddie, Garrett Temple, Theo Pinson, David Nwaba, and Joe Harris on the Nets guard side. Vic, who do we have on the Knicks side?
On the Knicks side, we got Arizona's own Kadeem Allen, the Maple Mamba RJ Barrett, Damian Dotson, Wayne Ellington, Elfrid Payton, Dennis Smith Jr., and Frank Ntilikina.
Man, I'm loving these nicknames. Didn't even know half of those blokes in their nicknames. But, I mean, the New York Knicks, their guard depth, like there's a lot of guys there, but how they fit together it's not very coherent. We can put it that way. The Nets' biggest strength, I wrote on the Hot Take Marathon that the guard depth is the Brooklyn Nets' biggest strength. And you could compare maybe against, 28, 29 other teams, a heap of other teams in the NBA. And the Nets will almost come out on top when it comes to their guard depth. And the Knicks are no exception to that. They've got some young guys that are unproven. We saw Elfrid Payton do some nice things in New Orleans. Dennis Smith obviously coming across in their Kristaps Porzingis trade. What can he become? Wayne Ellington, a nice little pickup as a sharpshooter. And Frank Ntilikina is obviously an unproven commodity, and surprised to still see him on the squad. To be honest, there was obviously rumors of the Nets even getting involved for a trade for him, but it's quite a clear tick for the Brooklyn Nets when it comes to the guards.
Well, at least I know on the Knicks side of things, there's some cause for some optimism. A lot of what we heard for over the summer from Fizdale is that he's been working out with Dennis Smith Jr., Mitchell Robinson, and Kevin Knox. They've apparently been in and out of the gym, working out together. RJ Barrett, Maple Mamba, Summer League wasn't really impressive. A lot of ups and downs. I'm not someone that puts a lot of merit in terms of what we see in Summer League, but I think RJ Barrett is going to have a big future with the Knicks, particularly on the defensive side of things. Obviously, Wayne Ellington is a veteran presence. The big surprise for me and somebody who I'm really looking forward to seeing this season is Elfrid Payton. We got signed him from the Pelicans. Towards the end of the season, he had something close to 5 triple-doubles. He's somebody who's always been in injury trouble. But I think he's one of those people that is great to take a flyer on. And considering the type of depth we have at the point guard position, really excited to see what we get there.
Yeah, I mean, on the Knicks side, there is a lot of potential there. Obviously, the Nets are more experienced, and you kind of know what you're getting, and you have that star player in Kyrie Irving and possible other stars in LeVert and Dinwiddie. But, Vic, what do you think about RJ Barrett in this upcoming season? Do you think he'll be better as a two-guard, or could you see him playing some minutes at forward as well?
I'm sure what he brings on the defensive side of things, his ability to defend the point guard, shooting guard, small forward, they're going to move him around. In terms of what he does on the offensive side of the ball, I think he's somebody who really needs the ball in his hands to have success. I think that you'll see him. I'm not sure he'll be a 20-point scorer. I think he'll find a way to get his shots. But defensively, he's definitely going to have an impact. And that versatility is going to help Fizdale a bunch, considering the other young guys he has on the squad.
Yeah, another guard question for you, Vic. You were saying, the excitement levels related to Elfrid Payton, but, was the acquisition of Elfrid Payton, what does that mean for Dennis Smith Jr.? Obviously talking about him and how he's looking good in the offseason, hanging out with the two other young guys and the coach and David Fizdale. Who would you want to see the point guard spot solidified for? Like, who is the number one point guard by, game 55 of the regular season?
That's an interesting question. When you talk about Dennis Smith Jr., when you think about the kind of summer he had, for me as a Knicks fan, really excited to see him come in. I think he's going to come in with a different energy. I mean, prior to June, we were thinking that we were going to end up with Zion Williamson, or the young guy for the Grizzlies.
John Morant.
Yes, John Morant. And Dennis Smith Jr. was somebody who all of a sudden fell to the wayside after we traded for him mid-season. You get into the summer, Fizdale knows now that this is who he's got on his team. Same thing with Ntilikina. The rumors were out there that he was going to get traded, and nobody was really sure in terms of what we're going to see with Dennis Smith Jr. I really believe that he's putting in the time in the gym. Apparently, a big goal that was set for Fizdale set for Dennis Smith Jr. in the summer was to lose weight. So they say he's apparently hovering at 195 would be something we saw for him at NC State. Hopefully that helps him on the defensive side of things. But to answer your question, I definitely think Dennis Smith Jr. is going to be the point guard for the Knicks when you look at the 55-game mark. No. I think that's the guy that Fizdale puts all his faith in.
What do you expect to happen with Frank this year? Do you think they'll just end up trading him, or he's going to get a fair shot? I know Knicks fans, one of the only real issue they had with Fizdale was that he didn't really give Frank a fair shot last year. Do you think he'll get that in New York, or he's most likely on the way out?
In the very least, he's an asset. He's still very young, which is why I don't understand why people have gotten so down on him. I think even the expectation was when he got drafted that this was going to be a 3-4 year thing. This wasn't going to be someone who's going to give you those results right away at his position. I love the fact that apparently he's gotten taller. I also know that he's a defensive stopper. Yeah. He's going to find time. He's going to find minutes in the rotation. But I'm not entirely sold that Fizdale has him in the plans for the future. Early on in the season, I wouldn't be surprised to see him get minutes. I'm pretty sure the Knicks are going to, in any case, whether they want him to stay on the team or they're trying to market him for see where his value is on the trade market, I'm sure we're going to see bits and pieces of Frank. But I think we're going to see some of these gains that people were expecting maybe 2 years ago, which is kind of unfair considering how young he was. But still has a ton of talent, still very young. No reason to give up on the young guy.
Yeah, I've always been a big fan of Frank, especially because coming into the league, like you mentioned, he was really raw. You saw the skill set, but it just wasn't developed yet. But moving on to forwards, obviously on the net side, Kevin Durant out, possibly coming back at some point in the season. Joe Harris is kind of a guard/forward. We got Taurean Prince, Rodion Cruz, and also Wilson Chandler. Who do we got on the Knicks side, Vic?
Well, Knicks fans, if you were watching Summer League, Ignas Brazdeikis from Michigan really showed out. UNC's Reggie Bullock, Taj Gibson, Kevin Knox coming back, Marcus Morris, Julius Randle is a big addition, and last but not least, Bobby Crazy Eyes Portis.
He did. I love the Crazy Eyes of Bobby Portis. This is where the New York Knicks really have their strength, that forward position. But no one is really a true small forward in this. You know, all the sort of names that Vic was rattling off there, all of them are essentially power forwards. So you're asking guys to play down, which is essentially not what it is traditional basketball these sort of days. You ask guys to play upper position and sort of play that sort of small ball. You know, I've said before that, you know, the Nets sort of lack real high-end talent at this sort of position, but, you know, there's guys in there that I think are talented enough that they compare well against the Knicks. But I think the Knicks might probably have maybe a slight edge. You can certainly make the argument purely because of a guy like Julius Randle who, you know, is just an incredibly productive player. If he can find, you know, some range from the outside, which I've seen some videos of, and if he can ever have some sort of defensive effort or capability on that end of the floor, he can become a really important player. And obviously, out of these sort of guys, he's the one on the sort of long-term contract. And then, you know, Kevin Knox, what could he be? He's just still a baby and going forward. And Reggie Bullock is just sort of that nice sort of, you know, utility that can, you know, play some defense and then hit some threes. And then Bobby Portis as well. Similar sort of player to a Julius Randle, probably just a lesser version of him in a lot of ways. I'll be interested to see how David Fizdale works out that rotation as well. It's just a massive glut. But I do like what the Nets have. Obviously, Rodion's going into his next season. Taurean Prince, you know, we saw a stat from Hardwood Paroxysm. The fact that he has the highest effective field goal percentage on catch and shoot at 68%, which is pretty ridiculous, and he's going to fit perfectly in the net system, you know, alongside Kyrie Irving. And Wilson Chandler, a nice sort of backup, a nice sort of veteran presence there. But I think because of the pure sheer amount of guys, NBA-ready guys and above-average NBA-ready guys, the Knicks maybe have the tick here.
Well, I'm going to go out and say I think the Knicks are right now where the Nets were about 3 years ago. Post-Boston fleecing, you bring in a new coach, you recognizing that you're going to have to take on some reclamation projects. And I love what I'm seeing in terms of the forwards. I love the Taj Gibson addition. I think he's going to be somebody who's going to replace he's going to be for Mitchell Robinson what DeAndre Jordan ended up being for him mid-season when they did that move. Yeah. Really excited about Ignas Brazdeikis. Solid career in Michigan, still very young at 20 years old, solid shooter, seems to be able to defend on the perimeter, nice size at 6'7", so he's going to bring some versatility. Knicks fans, I know there's a lot of doubt in terms of what we see with Kevin Knox, but when you bring in these younger guys, there needs to be a certain level of patience. That's the key word when you see the Knicks, patience. So when I think about what the Knicks are going to do this season, and you think about the composition of the roster, I think additions like Taj Gibson, I think the additions of Alfred Payton, I think the addition of Julius Randle, these are all people who have come. Taj Gibson particularly is a veteran, and then some of these other younger guys who've had to fight for their spot in the league, they're going to be modeling that for the Dennis Smith Jr.'s, for the R.J. Barretts, for the Mitchell Robinsons. Marcus Morris is another vet who I think is going to have a strong presence. And then Bobby Portis, I love Crazy Eyes. Bulls fans will tell you, has ability to stretch the floor. He's going to be able to defend the 5 and the 4 spot. So I think he's going to give the team a lot of versatility. And in terms of wins and losses, I'm not sure if you're going to see a lot of that this year from the Knicks. I don't think that this is going to be a year when we see that big jump, but I definitely going to see the gains and the growing from the younger players.
Yeah, the forward group is really interesting, obviously, because they have such a surplus. And like you said, it's probably a nod to the Knicks here because they have so many above average forwards. There's just so much depth there. But the really interesting thing here is, like, how's Fizdale going to hand out the minutes, especially with so many guys who are going to want to get minutes, and they all kind of play a similar position. Some of them can get minutes at small forward, but it seems like a lot of it's going to be at power forward. And then you probably have guys like Bobby Portis and Julius Randle and Taj Gibson getting some minutes at the 5 too.
Absolutely. And I think that's going to help in terms of the makeup of the Knicks. They don't really have any expectations going into the season. Fans feel like they whiffed out on Kevin Durant and Kyrie. Seeing them go to Brooklyn is just a different feeling in the Garden. But for me, as somebody who's been watching the Knicks for the last 25 years, and I can remember the days of John Starks and Patrick Ewing in the Garden and what it's been since, watching the team go about it the right way when we're just taking the draft picks. We're not trying to get away from our assets and go after obviously we wanted to get Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant in the summer, but we didn't lose anything. We didn't have to trade anything. Mitchell Robinson, in my opinion, is going to be one of the best young players in basketball. I wouldn't be surprised if he's up for most improved player next year and quite possibly all first team defensively. He just has that type of potential, and they had him in the second round. So I really believe in what I see from Scott Perry, from Fizdale. I think they're going in the right direction. It's just about being patient.
And before we get to the centers, how many of these forwards do you think will be on the team by the end of the season? Because I know a lot of the contracts are short-term, really good tradable contracts to help the Knicks probably get more assets at the deadline. If you had to make a guess, what 2 forwards do you think will be traded?
If I had to make a guess who would be traded, Reggie Bullock, and Bobby Portis. And I love Bobby Portis' game, but I feel like his game is so appealing in this era of the stretch 4 and stretch 5s. His ability to stretch the floor. I think with these 2-year contracts, they're going to be teams who are knocking on that door come February when they're starting to hit that playoff run, and they know they have they see guys who can fill a role in their playoff roster.
I think they're good picks. Jack, who would you say?
Yeah, I would probably say those two as well. I think Marcus Morris is certainly a candidate as well. One thing I wanted to throw at Vic as well before we get to the centers is the priority when it comes to these 4 positions for you, Vic, as just a fan, obviously, is just getting the runs under a guy like Kevin Knox, under a guy like Julius Randle. Like if you see Marcus Morris and Bobby Portis and Reggie Bullock getting 30-plus minutes a night and Kevin Knox getting 15 to 18 minutes, is that going to be a disservice to his development?
Well, it depends on what part of the season we're talking about. If we're having this conversation in December, probably not. I think it should be like that. I would want to see people fighting for minutes, and whoever's earning it is earning it. If you're on the bench, it gives the players an opportunity to get their spot back, get some more minutes. If we're having the same conversation come February, I'd be concerned. I think Kevin Knox has to be priority, and I think Fizdale obviously knows he's on a short leash, whether he likes it or not. That's been just the culture here in New York. Coaches are coming, coaches are going. He realizes that his tenure and the success he has in this tenure is going to be contingent on the growth of Dennis Smith Jr., Kevin Knox, and Mitchell Robinson. So obviously, I think Kevin Knox is going to be somebody who gets the minutes. Idris Brazdikins, he really impressed in the summer league. He's somebody really consistent in Michigan. I think he's going to be able to stretch the floor. I wouldn't be surprised if they moved him around to the 4 spot in certain positions against certain matchups. Really tough. I think he'll find his time into the rotation. I wouldn't be surprised if he spends a lot of time in the G League, but I obviously think that he's a young piece that they're going to look to implement going forward.
Quick question before we get to centers. Who's going to have the biggest year between Dennis Smith Jr., Kevin Knox, and R.J. Barrett? Which guy would you bank on having a big year?
So I am not somebody who places a lot of value into like YouTube, and I think for some reason I think Dennis Smith is getting this weird rub because he's part of that YouTube generation where you've seen him kind of come up through the ranks from like sophomore year, and then when you saw what happened at NC State, you might not have been quite impressed with what you saw, but I really think for what's happened the last 2 years and what happened in Dallas, he gets to New York, and then no sooner that he's in New York, fans are crying for John Morant. I really think from what I've seen with pictures, and I know we can't put a lot into some of the videos and pictures, but what I've seen in terms of what he's done in terms of his body and the conditioning, I think he's going to have a big year. RJ Barrett, I think he's going to be somebody who's going to have success. He's going to be consistent with that jumper. And in ISO ball, he's going to be great. He's going to find a way to score. He's long. If they have him at the 2 spot and he's paired with Knox, he's going to have some favorable matchups. But I really think Dennis Smith Jr. with the ball in his hand time after time, I think he's the guy we need to look out for.
Jack, who you wrong with?
Yeah, I was just going to say, what I find funny is that Frank Ntilikina taken in the 2017 draft, pick 8. Dennis Smith Jr. rumored to go to the Knicks, taken pick 9 by the Dallas Mavericks. Obviously, Ntilikina was taken by Phil Jackson to fit the sort of triangle system that he wanted to implement. But it's just funny how the NBA world works and sort of all the sliding doors. And now that they're both on the same team, and obviously that there was a desire from the front office that Vic sort of talked about in relation to Dennis Smith. I think people are sleeping a little bit on Dennis Smith. I'm not necessarily incredibly high on him, but I think RJ Barrett is the cachet to the New York Knicks going into next season. You know, he's the marketable sort of guy, you know, the Duke sort of star. We've seen some really cool sort of hype videos and him being presented at the Garden. I think RJ Barrett's going to have a really up and down season. I think he's going to have a better rookie season than Kevin Knox, and that's not necessarily saying a lot. But I think RJ Barrett will have probably the best season out of all of them because I think he'll be given the free reign to do the most out of all these guys. And I think that, you know, he is probably the guy with the highest upside out of the ones that you've said, Nick. You know, I really like Mitchell Robinson too, like Vic was alluding to earlier. But out of the guys that you mentioned, I think RJ Barrett has the highest star potential, at least right now. I'll be happy to probably, you know, eat my words when it comes to a guy like Dennis Smith Jr., but for me, it's RJ Barrett.
RJ's got that New York swag too. He's got like that confidence to play in New York that not a lot of guys have. I think for Dennis Smith, like you've seen a lot of things that have looked great. I want to just see the jump shot. And I've heard the jump shot is looking better. That's going to be the factor for him because he's such a great athlete. He has no issue getting inside and finishing inside. It's about now our team's going to respect you at that 3-point line. But let's hop over to centers. Obviously on the net side, we got Jared Allen, DeAndre Jordan, Nick Claxton. Vic, who we got on the center side for the Knicks?
Right now I have Mitchell Robinson, Taj Gibson, and Bobby Portis doing double duty.
See, I'm probably going here purely as the collective for the Brooklyn Nets. But you could make a really good case for Mitchell Robinson as having the best 2019-20 season out of all these centers that we've just listed. He had an incredible rookie season. I saw a post on Facebook, I think it was, that Mitchell Robinson had, you know, a near similar amount of blocks to Rudy Gobert in like half the minutes. Now, that's one thing that is a strength and a weakness of his watching him play, that he can go after it a little bit in terms of the blocks, but he has that ability, that length, that lateral quickness to actually do so, that it's just pretty incredible what he can be on the defensive side of the floor. And I think that, you know, the partnership that he could develop with a guy, Dennis Smith Jr., could be something pretty special. And I'm really intrigued to sort of see what he can do because he's a special talent, especially defensively. But then, you know, a guy like Jared Allen, you know, you can't have a conversation about these two centers without mentioning the other one when it comes to Knicks and Nets Twitter because, you know, Jared Allen, I think, has a more polished offensive game and has done more, I guess, across his, you know, a couple of extra years in his career. But I would be, you know, remiss to say that Mitchell Robinson, by the end of next season, could be the better prospect going forward because Jared Allen has had moments of growth where it's sort of been stunted a little bit. You know, he's had his moments where he's been played off the floor against the likes of, you know, Enes Kanter and Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic, whereas I think Mitchell Robinson has a little more grit in him and a little more strength in him that I think he relishes that sort of opportunity. And I'm hoping the fact that the tables are turned and Jared Allen can be the guy going forward. And I'm expecting also a revitalized season from DeAndre Jordan. I think he's going to really put in. He's a rebounding machine. His per 36-minute numbers, you know, did not drop at all, despite the fact he saw less minutes in New York and Dallas. He's a monster, and hopefully there's some synergy there, and there isn't like a clash of sorts, because we saw the Ed Davis Jared Allen synergy pretty nicely. But obviously Jared Allen wants to start, DeAndre Jordan wants to start. That competition hopefully breeds some positive sort of competitiveness. But yeah, Mitchell Robinson's a stud.
So I'm a little surprised when we talk about the Nets, only because I was very taken back. Well, I wouldn't say taken back, but watching Jared Allen play in Summer League, I felt like sent a clear message to the organization. And it was the idea that he's all in, he's willing to compete, and he wants a spot. As soon as I saw that DeAndre Jordan, who, I mean, as much as I feel like in the general media people might be down on him, he's definitely somebody who, if he would have decided to take in more suitors in free agency, he would have had his pick of the litter, considering the situations that you see in some of these other organizations. So I'm not entirely sure how that's going to work out. If the idea is that DeAndre Jordan starts, what does that mean for Jared Allen? In terms of the Knicks, Mitchell Robinson to me is the future. I can't believe they got him where they got him. I think 5 years from now, we're going to be talking about him in the same breath as we talk about Gobert. I don't want to be like big on the hyperbole here, but when I see him shoot the ball, the jump shot doesn't look broken. When I see him defend on the perimeter, he seems to be able to shift, and he was able to be second in the league in blocks in 20 minutes per game. So if he's able to stay on the floor, I think he's going to be one of the best young basketball players in the league. So there's when you bring up names like Anthony Davis, I know right now it seems kind of obscene because it's such a stretch. But that output, in terms of what he did defensively, that's not normal. It's exceptional. And I think people who got a chance, Knicks fans who were just able to watch it and through the losses, see his development and what you saw from him November when he had a breakout game, I believe, against the Magic, had 5 blocks. And then you saw what he was able to do in like April. He's definitely I think he is the guy in New York now. As much as RJ is going to be the person we see on the posters, and obviously he has a certain level of polish, came up through the Canadian Basketball League. His father's a big name. What we can get from Mitchell Robinson in terms of productivity is not something you see in this NBA anymore. And if he's able to stay on the floor, number one, stay healthy, obviously. As he gets stronger, we're going to see these rebounding numbers go up. And if he can stretch the floor, there's no reason why he can't be a top 10 basketball player in the league. Only because centers are at a premium. This is not something we see every day.
Yeah, I think he has a long way to go in terms of like his offensive skill set. The blocks are definitely there. I think defensively, he still needs to have a better understanding of playing defense as a team defense. And then obviously the foul trouble was a thing last year. But he definitely has the potential to be the best center of the group next season. I would still lean towards the Nets because they actually have 2 centers where the Knicks are going to have to play, Gibson or Portis or Randall at center. They're going to be undersized. But Robinson definitely has a really high ceiling. It's going to be interesting to see how he develops. And then also having a veteran point guard like Elfrid Payton might help him a little bit more too.
Yep. Elfrid Payton's definitely going to be a big piece. I'm not really too concerned in terms of what we see offensively from Mitchell Robinson. What I want to see is hopefully when we see these pick and rolls and these other offensive motions, when he gets it out on the perimeter, I just want to see him comfortable taking the shot. Yeah. That's all. At least from right now, he's only in his second season. He's already showing you what he needs to show you on the defensive side of things. The Knicks right now are not looking for him to be somebody who's going to be the guy offensively. Is going to be coming on the perimeter with Dennis Smith and RJ and Knox. Hopefully we see some big games from Knox this season. But Robinson has like a specific role, and within that role, he'll be able to have a ton of success with the Knicks.
Yeah, obviously, like Jack mentioned early on, it's going to be a lot of talk about Jared Allen versus Mitchell Robinson. A lot of that's going to depend on DeAndre Jordan's role. I think Jared Allen will probably end up starting, so we'll hear a lot of talk. And if Allen doesn't start, I still think he'll probably get starter minutes. But hopefully DeAndre Jordan can mentor Allen a little bit like he mentored Robinson. So we'll see how that plays out. But getting to the coaching side, Kenny Atkinson versus David Fizdale.
I think it has to go to Kenny Atkinson just purely because of the success that he has had with the Brooklyn Nets. That's not to discredit, what David Fizdale has done across his career. And, with the New York Knicks there, at least, we in a similar sort of way, David Fizdale is a player's coach. We've seen the passion that he has for his players out in Memphis as well. He's all in when it comes to his players. Obviously, there's a frosty sort of relationship with Frank Ntilikina. Maybe that has been ironed out a little bit in the off season. But Coach Kenny has proven it. He was a Coach of the Year contender, got some votes last season. Not to say that David Fizdale is a poor coach in any stretch of the imagination. I think he should be with the Knicks for a long time because I think the continuity could certainly help them. I know Vic made a mention of the fact that there could even be pressure on him this season, which I think would be incredibly silly. I think continuity in the coaching ranks really makes a difference. So David Fizdale is a good coach and an accomplished coach in his own right. But Coach Kenny is on the up, and he's going to have his test this season, especially with a guy like Kyrie Irving in the locker room. But Kenny Atkinson has the edge right now.
Yeah, it's Kenny Atkinson in the landslide. It's not even close. Watching from afar, trying to appreciate the Nets situation the last couple of years, post the Boston fleecing, and seeing how they've been maneuvering. And when you see the addition of Dinwiddie, who I was a fan of in Colorado, ended up tearing up his knee, bounced around a little bit, watching him have success there, seeing what he's been able to do with Kurus, D'Angelo Russell, who's no longer there. They were able to take on him, and you saw the success he had last year. He was an all-star. Kenny Atkinson, 14 years of international basketball, has a certain level of pedigree, has a philosophy, knows how he wants to go about to do it, and it's all about player development. When you look at the next staff, I mean, you see names, they're littered with names of NBA players, or at least former NBA players. So you see Jacques Vaughn. I know Tiago Splitter is associated with the club, and Pablo Prigion, who used to play for the Bulls, was also with the club last year. So they definitely know what they want to do. They're going about it a certain way. The GM, Sar Marks, also has NBA experience as a player. So they know exactly what they want to do. In terms of Fizdale, I think it's very similar to what the Nets are doing, and they put in this onus on player development. He's coming from that Riley school, so obviously is going to be an emphasis on defense. 17 and 65 was like tied for worst in franchise history and definitely worse in the NBA last year. But this is what you should expect. I mean, the first year when you look at Kenny Atkinson, 2016, 2017 with the Brooklyn Nets, they went 20 and 62. So I don't put a ton of what we see in terms of coaching and what we saw in the first year. I think they've gotten more talent. When you look at the Knicks staff, they also are littered with former players. Royal Ivey, former Knick, Howard Isley, Judd Bushler was coaching Summer League, Keith Smart. So I think they recognize that they have a lot of young players. They're best suited to have some other former players come around, mentor, give them some training in terms of the on the court and the off the court, and hopefully we get to build a winning culture here in New York like they did in Brooklyn.
Yeah, you guys have been pretty spot on. It's almost like the Knicks want Fizdale to be where Kenny's at now, and maybe he can kind of have the win increase this year, the player development with some of the younger guys, and turn some of these projects into star players moving forward. So obviously Kenny a little bit more established at this point, but Fizdale has a great opportunity moving forward with the Knicks with a lot of young talent. But on the chemistry side, how we view these teams?
Yeah, I mean, everyone makes note of the Brooklyn Nets chemistry. It's going to rely on a guy like Kyrie Irving, who is, establishing some real bonds with his teammates in LA right now. We see Taurean Prince almost just be that sort of guy who's just going to be perfect in the locker room as just a perfect sort of piece. And, he's been doing some of his charity stuff as well. Spencer Dinwiddie, the guy who probably was the catalyst to getting Kyrie Irving. So I think there's going to be a relationship there. Kyrie Irving as well with DeAndre Jordan. We know the relationship there. And then Kevin Durant in the wings, despite the fact that he's not going to be playing much basketball, if any at all, next season, he's still going to be a locker room presence behind the scenes, a faux assistant coach, as Coach Kenny has said. So I think that chemistry was one of the real, I think that out of any team, in the NBA last season, I think that alongside the Los Angeles Clippers, the Brooklyn Nets had the best chemistry in the league, and that accounted for an extra probably 4 or 5 wins. And, coming back from that 8-game losing streak, I think that chemistry was a real key indicator for why that happened. And, you add in Wilson Chandler and Garrett Temple, these sort of guys, hopefully they can provide that same sort of presence. For the Knicks, it's hard to sort of project. I like the likes of Taj Gibson as a sort of veteran presence. Bobby Portis has punched a teammate in the face before, so I don't know if he's. I hope he doesn't punch Julius Randle in the face because he's not getting enough minutes. But there's a lot of young guys on this roster, as Vic has alluded to as well. So there's this weird amalgamation of really sort of high project sort of talent guys, but I think that the coach is going to be a real sort of catalyst for how he can sort of drive this going forward, because there isn't a lot of veteran talent. You look at Marcus Morris, Taj Gibson, Wayne Ellington, Reggie Bullock. These sort of guys can provide some on-court and off-court chemistry that I think will be beneficial to the Knicks. I don't think there's going to be any real issues or any real disharmony. I think that the Nets have a lower floor because of, Kyrie Irving essentially, but also have a higher ceiling because if things really do click, there could be a third seed, as I predicted for OGDbasketball.com. Whereas the Knicks don't necessarily, have any real chemistry issues that I can think of outside of Bobby Portis.
So I'm really, as much as people are excited about the Kyrie Irving addition, and he's a terrific basketball player. He's obviously a top 5 player at his position, probably top 10 in the basketball overall. I have concerns in terms of how he's going to fit, particularly on the floor. When I think about the combination of Kyrie Irving, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and how that looked last year, these were people who predominantly, they find their success with the ball in their hands. I look at what's going to happen in Brooklyn, and I think about how he's going to fit with a Spencer Dinwiddie, and particularly a Karis LeVert, who was on fire in the beginning of the season before the injury. So I'm kind of interested to see how those 3 pieces work. Obviously, we have Prince coming off the bench. He's going to be vying for minutes. I think the ball is going to be in Kyrie's court. They're obviously giving him the keys to the kingdom with Kevin Durant out. But I do have concerns in terms of how it's going to look and feel when you see the 3 best players on the Nets, in my opinion, who are going to end up being Karis LeVert, Spencer Dinwiddie, and Kyrie Irving playing. Now, who is somebody going to be willing to come off the bench? I know at least early on when Karis came back, you saw him his role in the rotation was changing. Is somebody going to be willing to take that back seat? Obviously, it's not going to be Kyrie Irving, but how's that going to look for the Nets? And in terms of the Nets, they're all unproven commodities. So I'm wondering who's going to take the lead in terms of the lead bull in the locker room and on the floor. Is Dennis Smith going to be the one who's getting the predominant amount of shots? Is R.J. Barrett ready to be somebody who's the primary guy? Mitchell Robinson, we don't have those same expectations offensively, but we know what he's going to bring defensively. And then Kevin Knox, he was another guy who's really young, long, 6'9". He still needs time to grow into his body. He seems to be able to even though his numbers might not speak to it. And Knicks fans, obviously, because his year was underwhelming, the numbers might not speak to it. He still shows the skill set of somebody who can play on the perimeter. So we might see some big, obviously, for me, a frame of reference is like Paul George. And I can remember watching him sit behind a Danny Granger, watching him play in spot minutes. You started to have those questions because he wasn't somebody who was a proven commodity. He came from Fresno State. I think people see Kevin Knox. Not everybody's in love with him. Last year wasn't amazing. And going into this season, we don't know what type of expectations to have for him. There's very strong possibility that if he put in the time in the weight room because of what he can present physically, he might be somebody who garners a bulk of the shots on the offensive side of things. I know RJ is going to take his shots. Dennis Smith Jr. is another person who's coming in after working out in the summer. Offensively, he needs to work on that outside shot. But the Knicks, we don't really have an idea of what it's going to look like in terms of identity. The only thing I do take some solace in knowing, Fizdale coming from that Spoelstra school of doing things, coming from that Riley school of doing things, we're going to be better defensively. That's the only thing that I'm willing to put some money down on. Otherwise, in terms of who's going to be that guy offensively and how they fit, I couldn't tell you. I can't wait to see the preseason.
Yeah, I mean, you guys nailed it again. And pretty much the expectations are so much different for both teams. It almost impacts the chemistry. Obviously, people are scared about the Kyrie Irving thing. I'm pretty optimistic about it, especially because Kyrie's been setting up the practices like Jack has mentioned and already seems like developing a nicer relationship with Karis LeVert and Spencer Dinwiddie. And then on the Knicks side, there really isn't that high of expectations. The only thing you probably worry about is guys being upset about their minutes because they have such a surplus at different positions, like who's going to get power forward minutes, especially if a guy's trying to get traded or things along that guy, or maybe a young player's getting minutes and a vet wants those minutes. I know DeAndre Jordan wasn't super happy last year about his role, but overall, obviously, there isn't really the expectation there for the Knicks. But moving on to the offensive side, Nets versus Knicks, who has the edge?
It's pretty clearly the Brooklyn Nets. They have Kyrie Irving, and I think that is just enough to give them any sort of edge.
Yes, Nets in the landslide. Obviously, the Knicks, a lot of young players. We don't know where they're going to fit. We don't know what type of identity the team is going to have. I have to give it to the Nets here.
Yeah, this one, pretty easy here. Obviously, the Nets have a lot more offensive talent, and they have guys that are a lot more established. Now, defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, this is where it gets that little bit closer. You could make a pretty easy, clear argument that Mitchell Robinson might be the best defender out of both of these teams. But I think as a collective, Karis LeVert, Jared Allen, Taurean Prince, who hopefully will go into some sort of defender, Kyrie Irving showed some minor glimpses in a really positive defensive system out in Boston. John Joe Jordan, if he can get back to some semblance of actually wanting to defensively rebound and not just fill up the box score and actually move his feet a little bit in the pick and roll, I think that as a collective, you probably go with the Brooklyn Nets. But like sort of Vic was saying, with David Fizdale demanding sort of excellence on that end of the floor, Frank Ntilikina, if he actually gets some minutes, we know he can be a good defender. He is, there's no issue with that end of the floor for him. It's just whether he can actually produce enough on the offensive side to actually garner some minutes as well, because you can't be a Tony Allen in today's day and age, unfortunately. But a guy, Julius Randle, isn't a good defender, and he's going to be playing some regular minutes at the 4, and even at the 5, it could be disastrous. RJ Barrett has some potential on that end of the floor due to just his general measurements, but I'm not horribly, high on his defensive potential right now because he's a rookie, and most rookies aren't good defensively. Not everyone, Zion Williamson, has this freakish ability. And Alfred Payton and Dennis Smith Jr. Don't really necessarily scream defense either, despite the fact that they can put up some numbers and they have a little bit of athleticism and can prove a little bit on the floor. So I think just as a collective and, because of the defensive schemes and the amount of sort of talent on the squad overall, I think the cohesion will have a factor too. So I'll probably go with the Brooklyn Nets, but it is certainly a little bit closer.
So as a Knicks fan, it's really hard for me to get invested in a lot of the players because they're on such short-term contracts. So when I think about who we have and who's going to be sticking around, when I think about R.J. Barrett, when I think about Mitchell Robinson, when I think about at least Dennis Smith Jr. for now, I'm happy to see that they're surrounded by names like Wayne Ellington and the Alfred Paytons, Taj Gibson particularly, who's been a pros pro, been around the league, somebody who's from New York. So I think that really helps in terms of players dealing with the nightlife and what the city's like. I think he's going to be of real value for Coach Fizdale and the younger guys. One name to look out for in terms of the Brooklyn Nets, and I know we haven't really talked, Nicholas Claxton from Georgia, the rookie, second in SEC in blocks. I know that we don't have a lot of expectations. He's really young. A lot of people didn't expect him to get drafted where he got picked, but I think his versatility is going to be, because he can play the 4 and the 5, seems to be able to run the floor. He'll be a nice rim runner. I think Atkinson is going to find ways to give him some spot minutes, and I think he's somebody who's going to be a real asset to the club.
Yeah, Kenny was really high on him after Summer League. He showed off some nice versatility offensively, defensively. Just needs some development. I really like Nick Claxton. I'd like to see where he's going to be at in like 2 years. But talking defense, like Jack mentioned, I think I'm going to go with the Nets as a collective unit. And I think it's also just a perspective of a young team like the Knicks and a lot of players not knowing their future. Guys are going to probably care about offense a little bit more, and it's going to just be a little bit harder to get some of these younger players to play as a unit defensively. By the end of the season, they'll definitely improve, but early on, having these new pieces and a lot of young guys who haven't played NBA defense, it's going to be a struggle. So I'm going to go with the Nets here. And then who's going to have the better season overall?
It's the Brooklyn Nets by a pretty clear margin. The New York Knicks probably make some, I think Vic's been making some good points about the fact that there's almost like a model for them in terms of their crosstown rivals, in terms of what to look towards, building forward. How many wins could the New York Knicks team get? I reckon they could push that 35-40 win mark, depending on, how Fizdale coached. I think that more than anyone, I'm not as in. I watch a lot of New York Knicks basketball just because of the timing of wanting something in Australia. I think that David Fizdale is probably going to be the most important person in terms of how successful the season of 2019-20 is for the New York Knicks. And I know he talked about coaching already, but Fizdale is going to be integral to what his team does, and at the same time, so is Coach Kenny, how he can sort of get Kyrie on his side, and they can sort of build a relationship, as Vic was talking about with like a guy like D'Angelo Russell and Spencer Dinwiddie. I think that the Nets clearly will have a better win margin, better win-loss record, but the Knicks will certainly take a jump. It's just how high will that jump be?
Yeah, the expectations are so totally different for both clubs. The Nets are obviously where the Knicks want to be. The Nets have went through the grind. Atkinson, after 4 seasons, after 3 seasons, finally broke 500. They made the playoffs. The Knicks are coming off their tied for worst win-loss record in franchise history. Fizdale, obviously, we don't know how long he's going to be in that head coaching spot. Hopefully he gets more time. He's only here for 1 season. But in terms of what you see with Knox, Mitchell Robinson, Dennis Smith, It's going to be really important to see them grow and see them have gains in order for Fizdale and company to keep their jobs. And on the Nets side of things, this is the big step that everybody wanted. You finally got what you asked for. You got Kyrie, you got Kevin, and obviously we're not going to see Mr. Durant this season. But the addition of Kyrie Irving should be enough to push him further in the playoffs. How he meshes with the culture that the Nets have already set up, how he's able to fit with Karras and Spencer, it should be interesting. But I think they have the pieces to compete to be in the top of the Eastern Conference, most definitely.
And just a lot of the young guys, I think, will take a jump, too, of guys we didn't mention, like Rodions and Torian Prince and things along those lines. And I honestly think that we might see KD this season. But even without KD, the Nets obviously have the edge here. We don't really need to talk about the next question either, because the Nets would obviously win in a 7-game series. So we can get to who would be the top 5 players between these two teams, excluding Kevin Durant because he's injured.
Yeah, the top 5 players would be Kyrie Irving, Karis LeVert. Who else have we got? Let me get the depth charts up. You guys have a go.
All right, so I'm going to go with Kyrie number 1. I'm going to go with Spencer Dinwiddie number 2, Karis LeVert at number 3, Mitchell Robinson at number 4, and then Jared Allen number 5.
I'll probably concur with that list.
So mine is slightly different. I have Kyrie number 1, Karis LeVert number 2, Spencer Dinwiddie number 3, Julius Randle number 4, and then a Jared Allen, Mitchell Robinson tie at number 5.
Yeah. By the way, Joe Harris is my number 1.
Number 1 in your heart.
Always.
I think Robinson by the end of the season, I think will probably be their best player, but I think going to the season, Julius Randle is better than him. I think he's just going to provide more on the court. Defensively, he's not good, but he's the only Knick that can probably average 20 a night.
Yeah, he can average 20, 10, and 5. Like
that's really good.
He's a really good passer. He has a lot to his offensive game, but his weaknesses, on the defensive end and just in terms of being an effective player in terms of just adding to winning basketball, take away from a lot of the good things that he does do in terms of, all the things that we've spoken about.
Yeah, very reminiscent of me to Anthony Mason, which is fun because I feel like I'm having this Anthony Mason, Patrick Ewing pairing with Julius Randle and Mitchell Robinson is like 1994 all over again. But like you guys said, Randle's somebody who's probably going to be out of the box, probably the best scorer they have. He's able to do on the perimeter. I love what he's able to do in the open court as a 4. Obviously, he has some defensive deficiencies, will kind of scare you, and I think scare teams off in terms of giving him long-term contracts. But he's somebody who's going to be a major asset for Fizdale. And obviously, with a lot of these guys with the 2-year contracts, you never really know how it's going to work out. Sometimes you feel like it might incentivize them to come out and play more and increase their value. Sometimes you see players come out and they might seem a little defeated. I'm not sure what we're going to get from the Knicks, but I definitely think that Julius Randle is somebody who, in this climate with Fizdale, he'll find a way to get his points and minutes, and he'll probably get a bigger contract next time around.
That's what I think he's going for. I think he has a big chip on his shoulder, not getting the long-term deal this summer when he was hoping after not getting it the previous summer. I think he's the only Knick that they signed that's on a 3-year deal, and the third year is a team option. So he's going to probably hope after that third or second year that he's able to cash out and get that 4-year deal with the big money, because he's seen good money, but he hasn't seen that big contract yet, and I think that's what he's going for. But any other topics or questions you guys want to touch on before we get out of here?
No, but I'm looking forward to the Nets and Knicks games next season, probably more than any other, because there's certainly going to be plenty of battles, and the Knicks always seem to step up when it comes to versing their crosstown rivals, despite the fact that the Nets are much more talented on paper, have much loftier aspirations. The Knicks aren't going to make it easy for them. They've got a lot of guys who can play decent basketball and a good coach. The wins aren't going to be easy against the New York Knicks as much as they were even last season, because they just step up. Enes Kanter puts up 20 and 10 nights in 18 minutes. So I think that there's going to be some battles, a battle of the boroughs, as is always sort of highlighted.
I hope that is being cautiously optimistic. I'm hoping that's what we see. When I see that lineup, when I think about Karras, Spencer, and Kyrie, it gives me nightmares. And I know that with RJ coming into his first season, Dennis Smith coming, trying to find his role now that he knows that he's indeed going to be in Knick this season, there's going to be a lot of questions. But I think what you get with Fizdale and company is going to be some toughness, We're going to get some defense. We're going to see some open court basketball. If we're looking at it glass half full, I'm expecting Dennis Smith Jr. to be a way better player, so that should be like a notch on the belt. Kevin Knox is somebody at his size is going to be able to give Fizdale some versatility defensively. In the very least, if he's put on the weight and at 6'9" with his length and his ability to run the floor, I think he's going to be able to be an asset. Obviously, Mitchell Robinson, we talked about time and time again. I think he's one of the premier young big men in basketball. I think Bobby Portis is somebody who's going to surprise some people. I know people don't like these. When you see all these names and they seem to be playing the 4th spot, the flexibility that you get with Portis, I think he's going to be that key guy in the front court when you see that second unit. And then obviously in Elfrid Payton, somebody who's been highly productive, not highly productive, but he's found ways to have success in the league, but he unfortunately just can't get away from that injury bug. So if he's able to be in that second unit with Lonzo Trier from Arizona, who had a great year last year, wasn't a lot of expectations with him coming in, was able to shoot the heck out of the ball, put the ball on the floor. So they've got certain pieces. The expectations aren't particularly high. But for me right now, just like the Nets 4 years ago, what I want to see is just competing. Every night, I want us to have a set identity in terms of who we are. I hope that ownership decides to invest in Fizdale. And this is something that we can, as fans can expect to see going forward, whereas this Fizdale regime, as opposed to maybe, after this season, if we don't like what we see from the young guys, we're going to go in a different direction, and whoever's the biggest name in the summer, we're going to find a way to bring them in, and we're going to do this complete about-face that involves getting rid of Knox or Smith Jr. What I just want is some stability, some consistency, some vision, and that's all.
Yeah.
That's all I'm asking for.
And that's obviously been what's hurting the Knicks is it seems like every, couple years they just switch up what they're doing. Even if it was only half working, it's like, all right, let's fire the coach, change the whole system, and bring in these flashy free agent names that don't necessarily work out when they got Derrick Rose and stuff like that. So if they stay on this path and just let Fizdale develop these guys, if Fizdale's the right name, then I think it could work out. And then we could be talking about the Nets and Knicks competing in a playoff series in a couple years, but obviously not this season. But Vic, great having you on for your first show on
Thanks for having
Network.
me, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure, sir.
Jack, always a pleasure talking to you. And then, as always, thank you everybody for listening. You can check out the show, obviously, iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, Google Play, Dash Radio, YouTube, and NetsRepublic.com.